All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, welcome to another edition of the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and I am joined by Keaton Maisano as we are both in self-quarantine at this time. Weird times that we're going through right now. Probably nothing weirder, though, than this life without sports. I mean, how are you handling that so far, Keaton?
Yeah, it's been tough. It's been a lot of reminiscing for me, going back and looking at some old highlight tapes, old games. So with all new sports installments kind of stalled for the time being, it's a lot of reminiscing, going down a couple trips down memory lane for me.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Netflix and whatnot. I probably have about the last 5 seasons of Ohio State football recorded on. I have it on the computer, on the hard drive, just because of pieces that we've done out of it. I've gone back and watched some games. I actually went back and I watched the Ohio State-Wichita State game from 2013 and forgot just how ugly that game was. I was there in Los Angeles for it. But, just how weird is it not having the Ncaa Tournament right now? I know that on Thursday, right at 12, Twitter went crazy as everybody's like, well, we should be having games right now. Apologies to the first 4 and whatnot. And, we should have plenty of stuff to talk about. And we do, just none of it's sports-related.
Yeah, it's just very odd because, every March, it's just a staple of the year that you're going to see some college basketball. Kind of like every December, you expect Christmas. So it just feels weird that you're skipping almost like a part of your year. And it's just odd because you see all these highlights of past tournaments and you're like, we should be adding new memories to our memory bank. And you just don't get that. And it just feels like the chapter of the season just was left unfinished and the book just never got finished. So it's just odd. There's so many teams I kind of wanted to see make their tournament run. I really was interested to see how Dayton would do. This Ohio State team, which had an up and down year, just really interested to see who would be able to catch fire in March and just make the run to the title game. So it's definitely an odd feeling not to be able to kind of scratch that itch. But yeah, it's just the reality we're living in right now.
We'll jump back to the NCAA tournament here in a second. We were all in Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament. And this was shaping up maybe to be one of the best conference tournaments ever. I mean, certainly in Big Ten history with, 8, 9 teams that potentially could have won the Big Ten tournament. It was really setting up to be a fun event. We were out there on the Wednesday for the first 2 games, just to be in position, just to, be in place and whatnot. And then, all heck broke loose.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that in the year with the most parity, it was the most unpredictable event that ended up happening where none of the teams were going to win the tournament. But yeah, I just remember me and Braden were sitting almost the nosebleeds for that Indiana-Nebraska game when the situation started unfolding in the NBA and it started becoming more realistic that then the Big Ten tournament would end up getting closed down and then the NCAA tournament. So it just felt like the snowball had started rolling on the events that we're in now. But yeah, it was just a surreal experience. It just, I felt almost like an out of body experience. I didn't pay attention at all to that Indiana Nebraska game because I was so glued to Twitter seeing what was unfolding as far as the virus and how that was affecting sports. So, I mean, we went to the Big Ten tournament, went to Indianapolis, didn't get to see a lot of basketball, but definitely some memories that I'll be able to tell a bunch of people about in the future, and just definitely a unique experience for sure.
Yeah, you were there for 2 games. Maybe you watched one of them. I was there for the one, and then I took off with some other writers and went to go grab some dinner when that second game came on. And, we were out at breakfast with one of our great members here at Buckeye Grove, and that's when they kind of pulled the plug on the Big Ten tournament. And conversations definitely shifted as we were driving back to Ohio after we realized that we were really on the cusp of everything changing.
Yeah, and it was just so weird how quickly it happened. I mean, we were driving to Indianapolis on Wednesday, and it was the shocking news of the hour was that the Warriors were going to play without fans the next day. And I was like, that's a very unique situation. That's going to be odd. And then the news broke that the Ncaa Tournament was going to do the same thing with no fans. And those all felt like monumental things. But then by the time you're driving back to Columbus, it's like, that was just a distant memory because now we're not going to be seeing basketball. And it was just one of those situations where, like, you're just going to remember where you were when it happened. And it's definitely going to be one of those situations where we're going to look back on and just remember how unique 2020 started and how it affected the sports landscape.
So moving on to the NCAA tournament, which obviously is not going on at this point. It's kind of crazy because, I mean, as you would expect, everybody's running their mock tournaments and whatnot, and that's great because that gives us stuff to talk about. You look at the Florida State House; they push something through, which is just, largely insignificant. That they believe Florida State should be the national champions. Obviously, Kansas ended the season as the number one team in the AP poll. I think Ohio State fans are really going to rally around what the Washington Post did. However, they ran their mock tournament, and Ohio State won the national championship there. So, that certainly was something.
Yeah, the Washington Post their simulations seemed to really like the Big Ten, with 4 of the 8 Elite Eights being from that conference, and obviously Ohio State winning it all. But yeah, I mean, it's really fun to run all these simulations because it kind of lights a fire under different fan bases. I think that the teams that were the higher seeds probably are the teams that are griping the most, like a Dayton or a Kansas, or like you said, Florida State. But I mean, it's just kind of a funny situation where we'll never really know how this tournament unfolded. And even if they had played it out, the tournament's so unpredictable. Like, an Ohio State winning it all would not be the craziest thing that's ever happened in this tournament. I mean, there was a UConn team with Shabazz Napier who was not even close to the best team in college basketball that year that ended up winning it all. So, I mean, the fun thing about the tournament is how unpredictable it is. So the fact that we're not going to get to play it out, there's just no way of really knowing who was going to win it all. Because even though Kansas was the best probably positioned team to win it all, I mean, there's crazy things that happen each year. So these simulations kind of give a fun little debate, kind of fill our sports void for the moment.
For those who haven't had a chance to see it, in early round action, Ohio State is a number 5 seed in the Midwest region, defeat Yale and then defeat Oregon in the first weekend. Then they go on to defeat Kansas and Michigan State, and then they go to the Final Four, and they defeat in the national semifinals Dayton 80-64, and then in the national championship game defeat Baylor 74-69. So, hopefully, I'm guessing that this Washington Post simulation took into account that Kyle Young was coming back or whatnot, because Ohio State was a hot team coming down the stretch, winners of 9 of 12, but they were running very thin in terms of not having a lot of bodies on that roster. I mean, with the undetermined status of Alonzo Gaffney, the injury to Kyle Young, a lot of things like that.
Yeah, it'd be hard to imagine the Buckeyes be able to make a deep tournament run without Kyle Young. Just to play that many games in such a short stretch without the depth that they were playing with near the end of the year would be very difficult to imagine. And then, I mean, Kyle Young's added so much to that team. I mean, the offensive rebounding, just the energy, it just felt like he was kind of like the heartbeat of the team. So not having a guy like that in the month of March would be very difficult to kind of rattle off these difficult wins. And then you touch on the Dayton game. I mean, that was kind of a game that I think a lot of people wanted to see in this tournament. They were hoping that, like, at the time before any of this was canceled, that they would be put in the same bracket or near each other where there could be a path where there would be a meetup. So it kind of hurts a little bit more seeing in a simulation that matchup could have been. But yeah, I mean, it's just so much fun to look at this, just see all these matchups and just kind of like play in your head what these games would have looked like if they had happened in real time. So yeah, it's just definitely fun to look back on. I guess we can't get the actual games, so we're gonna have to settle for some words on some paper.
Ohio State was just not a favorite in terms of the Washington Post bracket. There was an ESPN BPI bracket that Ohio State made it to the Elite Eight, though I have seen ones where Ohio State is a 5 seed and falls in that 12-5 game. So, opinions are all over the place, and it will create a lot of conversation for years to come. And it's just, really a shame that we won't know how things would play out. But we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more basketball news and then some other fun things. So keep it locked in here. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Hey, welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined with Keith Masano as we sit here and talk a little bit about what's going on with Ohio State basketball in a landscape with no games right now. Obviously, big news came out earlier this week. DJ Carton has entered the transfer portal. For those who don't remember, he left the team focusing on his mental health, was gone for a while, came back to Ohio State to resume schoolwork, not really get involved with any basketball activities. Lo and behold, this whole COVID-19 thing happens. Students are sent back home. I think it probably is an expected outcome that he's going to try and start things up somewhere else.
Yeah, it's just a unique situation. I think that OSU handled the situation as best they could, but I think when you're in a situation like that for Carton, I think it's almost like you want to hit the reset button, kind of start over, is kind of what he said, get a fresh start. So I think, like you said, not the most unexpected result. I think it kind of hurts a little bit for OSU fans because you could see the potential of Carton on the basketball court. So it's kind of someone that you could see like being the future of the program, but just a situation where I think you have to almost put the person above the player here, and you kind of got to support his decision to really do what's best for him. So I think that whatever decision he comes to on where he goes, I just hope that that's a situation that's best for his mental health and best for him going forward.
And without getting too much into a situation, I've seen on social media, which is never the place to go, a lot of people who have just said this was homesickness and whatnot. I can assure you, without getting more into it, that it just was not a case of homesickness. And I think that there are a lot of people that I think we should probably have licenses to be on Twitter, because there are just a lot of people out there on social media that either are not who they represent themselves to be, or just are plain miserable, because it was just very disheartening, forcing DJ to take some time off from social media. We're talking about a kid who's dealing with some mental health concerns, and people just getting in there and railing on him. It's just disgusting. Yeah,
unfortunately, Twitter is where the strongest opinions will get posted. So you're going to have those people that are going to post some things that I don't think they're really thinking through or wouldn't say to his face. So I think that's the unfortunate reality of social media. That's kind of like the double-edged sword of it, because while you get more like connectiveness with these athletes, you also get the side of it where these people who probably shouldn't have a voice to be able to speak to these kind of kids are able to give their lesser opinions to him. Because I think this is kind of a time where it should be where you're not thinking more of the basketball side or the athlete side of DJ Carton. You should be really thinking more of the person and just understanding that his decision probably is not an easy one for him. It's probably one where I think if in a perfect world, he wouldn't want to be in this situation, but yeah, I think that Twitter is kind of one of those things where you kind of look at it for a little bit. And you just got to decide, hey, I'm going to turn this off for a little bit, because there's a lot of people in this world that I don't want to hear their opinions. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time, and definitely a weird time with social media.
Sticking with Ohio State personnel situations, we got another one coming up with Caleb Wesson. He has a year of eligibility left, but there are strong beliefs that he's played his last game in the Scarlet and Gray, because he went through the NBA process last year, and I think everybody kind of recognized at that point it was a fact-finding mission and whatnot. But I don't think there are a lot of people who truly believe that he is going to be back for a final season. I've seen him in some mocks in the late 30s, the early 40s in terms of draft picks. I mean, I certainly see a lot of people who think that maybe the undrafted free agent route, maybe Europe, whatnot. But he certainly has a big decision to make.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see where he goes with this, because like you said, a lot of people are projecting him to go pro. I think he's done a lot for his game as far as losing the weight, being a better defender is what I really saw from him this year, being able to stay out of foul trouble, which was kind of plaguing him the last 2 years. But yeah, I mean, he's done a lot for his game. I just don't know if he's at the point where he could be an effective NBA player just because he's a little bit undersized as far as a power forward or center would go in the NBA. I think he's done a great job at being a stretch big, which could help him. But if his aspirations are to be in the NBA, I think he would almost benefit from maybe coming back for another year. But if he wants to go and play in Europe, where probably his brother could possibly be playing in, then I guess he could do that. But it's definitely an interesting time for Ohio State basketball, because if he came back, then you would be looking at an Ohio State team which could be one of the favorites in the Big Ten with a senior Caleb Weston. But yeah, I really don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, because that could change the landscape of what Holtman's working with going forward if he decides to return.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make the argument here that, obviously from year 2 to year 3, he made some significant changes to, who he was physically in terms of just, his weight and whatnot. And I think he really did a lot of things to improve his game, but I don't know if there's enough there for him from year 3 to year 4. I mean, I think that if we're having this conversation 365 days from now, he's still kind of the same player. I mean, yeah, he's a year older, maybe a little bit more physically developed, but I don't know if we're looking at a guy that is, mid to late second round potentially. Just, you only have to have one team fall in love with you. If he comes back another year and he's suddenly, cemented himself in the first round. So, if you're in that kind of position and, you're at peace with everything and you're ready to go start your, your earning career, I certainly am not, I'm not one to say, well, anybody should stand in his way.
Yeah, the case could definitely be made that almost he's shown about all he can show as far as NBA potential. And it's really just if he's kind of satisfied with how his collegiate career has gone. I mean, maybe the fact that he didn't get to play in a postseason this year could possibly make him want to come back for another year so he can end his career at Ohio State with some kind of postseason validation. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I kind of see where you're coming from on the point that you really can't, it's not like he's going to make a huge jump going into year 4. He kind of showed what he can show. And like you said, if there's an NBA team out there who could really fall in love, could use a stretch like him, then I guess that could really be a deciding factor. And I always kind of thought of the athlete in the mindset that, like, if you can go get paid, you might as well go do that, because coming back another year could really, if you get injured or something, that could affect your future. So if there's someone who's willing to take a chance on Caleb Weston, I would not really be shocked if he decides to follow through with that and forego his final year.
And Ohio State certainly needs to play the roster management game. This isn't football where you have 85 scholarships, significantly fewer here. And, there's some moves in the works right now that we won't get into on this podcast. We'll talk about here at a later date that they're trying to get on. So, with the departure of DJ Carton, that certainly opens up a spot. But, I think in some ways, in terms of roster management, there is the expectation that Caleb leaves and that they certainly need the spot. With that being said, if it were, an opportunity to get a guy who's, a grown man back, I mean, you make that decision at that point. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I want to dovetail into something completely different here. For all intents and purposes, Keaton, you've probably covered your last live event as part of your internship here at Buckeye Grove, with this looking like it's going to be something that's going to stretch well into the spring and maybe even into the early parts of the summer and whatnot. And just in reflection, what are a couple of your favorite things that you were able to do as an intern here at Buckeye Grove?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it as we were leaving the Big Ten tournament, when we were kind of like saying how bizarre the situation was. It's kind of just about accumulating the memories and the stories. So I guess my 2 favorite stories that I could tell is definitely probably being on the field for the Big Ten championship game and just being able to like rush onto the field right after that, and just as the confetti dropped and as all the Ohio State players who had been so business-like the entire time finally got to really enjoy the moment, kind of celebrate a little bit as they kind of reached one of their first goals of the season by winning a Big Ten title. So that was a very cool experience for me, just kind of being able to, I'd never been to Indianapolis to cover a game, never saw the Big Ten championship game. So that was very cool experience. And then I think the other one would just be the entire Fiesta Bowl experience, just really going out there, getting in the resort, kind of getting treated like royalty, which Fiesta Bowl does a really good job of how they treat their media personnel. So that was a very good experience. I'd been to the Rose Bowl, so the next bowl game I really wanted to check off my bucket list was the Fiesta Bowl. So that was very cool. And then I think the memory that's really going to stick probably the most in my mind was after the Fiesta Bowl, we were in the locker room, and they had, like, after our media availability time had gone up, we were getting kicked out of the locker room. And obviously it wasn't the most excited locker room. It was very somber as the game had ended in a very, very tragic fashion for the Buckeyes, as Justin Fields had thrown a pick when Chris Olave and them had a miscommunication on the route in the end zone. But as we were leaving Justin Fields' locker was right on the exit door. As we were leaving, he sat there and shook every single media member's hand. So that's going to be a memory that's going to definitely stick in my mind for a long time, and it's definitely going to be a story I'll be telling a lot of people. Right.
So, not all of them necessarily result in Ohio State win. Ohio State certainly wins a lot, but it was kind of a surreal situation. For the Fiesta Bowl, I was stuck out in the breakout room trying to shoot video, and I think we got a grand total of 3 players, and we were promised 15 minutes, and we certainly didn't get 15 minutes. So I was kind of, from a professional standpoint, I was walking out of that situation in a very different place because, for one reason or another, they were not making my ability to do my job all that easy. But, it is what it is. But, we're certainly not done with you at this point. We're going to have plenty more BIA podcasts in the interim as we, have to get a little creative in talking sports, coming down the stretch. But, I want to thank you for being part of the show and being part of the site. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening to the BIA podcast. Without you, none of this would be possible. So for Keaton, I'm Kevin, and I want to thank you for listening to the BIA podcast, and we will talk to you very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.